Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to our Dark Side of the Ring review series. Here we are, season 6. And last time we talked about, of course, Mankind versus Undertaker, Hell in a Cell. You and I both have very distinct memories about watching that match, about talking about it endlessly through the years. It left a heavy legacy in the world of pro wrestling.
Yes.
This week, we're going to the other end of that. A guy who did not leave a heavy legacy in the world of pro wrestling, Ludvig Borga, who was a roster member for a brief time.
Less than a year.
During the new generation, and went on to channel his predilection for Nazism, for fascism, into a spot as a member of the Finnish political scene, the Finnish government there.
Parliament.
Yeah. I mean, this episode is just it's. I think this episode is kind of like, can you find any redeeming qualities at all about this particular individual?
his ex-wife called him a piece of shit.
Yeah, which isn't abnormal for exes to feel that way, but there's a lot to unpack here with Ludvig Borga, real name Tony Halme,
a deplorable individual. Yeah,
just a real piece of shit.
Yeah,
I mean that's really how you break this one down. There's no, I mean, I know they talk about his origin story to a degree. Where he grew up in shitty circumstances. A mom who wasn't present chose the bottle over her kids. By the time he was 15, he was basically out and about on his own. And I guess, if that's... I think there's been a lot of people in this world who have had a rough upbringing, and they didn't turn into a raging piece of shit like this guy did.
Yeah, I mean, that seemed to be, again, in the Foley episode, it kicked off with him saying people get in the world of pro wrestling because they find something missing. Mm-hmm. And one thing they said in this is that, given his upbringing, Tony Halme created this alter ego, the Viking. I think his ex-wife mentioned it. Mm-hmm. It always sticks with me in the Ric Flair documentary where he talked about, I didn't like who Richard Fliehr was, but I like who Ric Flair was.
Yeah, they're trying desperately to escape reality and their own existence, and so he takes refuge in pills. Mm-hmm. At one point, they do a shot. It's shocking as hell. If there's truth to it, it's shocking.
Oh, the fruit bowl.
The fruit bowl of Christmas-colored pills. Jesus Christ Almighty! That guy, seriously, bro. It's like when I go to my mom's house and somebody dropped off a giant thing of M&Ms.
Yeah, it's like the candy dish.
He's just digging in those things like nothing else. Yeah, this is just absolute self-destruction, and it's interesting because you mentioned Ric Flair, and Ric Flair is self-aware of the demons inside of him that cause him to lean more towards the Ric Flair character as opposed to try to inhabit that character, as opposed to bring it down to reality, to the real man, to the real person inside. And maybe if Tony Halme hadn't taken his own life, maybe somebody could get him for an interview where he expresses the same amount of self-awareness. Nothing about this episode suggests that ever existed with this guy. And there was plenty of opportunity because the entirety of his adult life, or from the WWF on, he was, especially during his time in politics, the guy was being interviewed all the time. And so who knows what, therapy could have done for this guy.
Yeah.
But man, oh man, he just seemed like the kind of guy who he had his own principles, I guess, that he stuck to. And they're pretty horrific principles that he stuck to.
Yeah.
There's so many little interesting things along the way. I know you have notes. I have notes. It opens up basically explaining because his time in wrestling was so short. They sort of have to start at the beginning where not at the beginning, but this is about a guy who is a wrestler. But the majority of the episode is not about that. The majority of the episode is everything else in his life because his time was so short.
Yeah. I mean, the total time probably talking about his wrestling career in this episode is maybe 10 minutes at that, maybe.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But it fit into the idea that he was looking to escape. He came to America after leaving Finland, after having a rough childhood. Came to the United States to pursue fame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he was in some movies, was working out at Gold's Gym, I think, in Venice, and someone suggested, hey, you should try pro wrestling. So he was wrestling Japan, got in some sort of altercation with Scott Norton.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
His time in Japan came to an end. He got signed to WWE, and he was in WWE for less than a year.
This is the wild thing. The wild thing about this is in the world of pro wrestling, a lot of shady characters.
Yeah.
A lot of shady characters.
Yes.
So it's rare when somebody comes along who is so shitty that universally in the locker room, like Jim Ross looked like he wanted to throw up the entire time he was talking about.
It was interesting that he said in 1993, he was very specific to say I was an on-air personality. Of course, later on, he would be vice president of talent relations because he mentioned that in the Foley episode.
And he even says, I'm just glad it wasn't me that hired this guy. He was very clear. He probably had that. He was like, listen, guys, I want you to know, I'm not doing this episode unless you let me clarify that I did not hire this guy. Because when it started off, I was like, oh, I wonder if Jim Ross was talent relations at this time. And no, he made it clear I had nothing to do with this.
Yep.
Yeah, so he shows up. Everybody hates the guy.
Yeah.
And but to try to make a big splash out of his character, and I was trying to verify that this was the case. Tatanka, who claims he had been on a 2-year undefeated streak, which during the New Generation era, I suppose is a possibility. But they had Ludvig Borga beat Tatanka on an episode of Raw, and he pinned him with like a single finger, which was extra disrespectful to the Tatanka character. But in any event, so that's how things started. Try to introduce this new devastating character. They put him in a program, or the idea was they were going to put him in a program with Lex Luger.
Mm-hmm.
And along the way, though, he just had no connection with the crowd. I mean, that's one thing that Cornette talked about, that Jim Ross talked about, that just nobody cared about the guy. Nobody in the crowd was like, oh, yeah, Ludvig Borga, he's great. And granted, I mean, that happened plenty in the WWF.
Oh, yeah.
Not everybody was gold. But when you look at a guy, like Jim Ross says, he's a big dude. He was a WWE-sized guy. But, it just takes that thing, and he didn't have that thing.
Yeah, no, he didn't. And after he left WWF, he tried MMA, lost to Randy Couture in less than a minute, ended up getting deported after getting arrested for gun and drug charges. So he went back to Finland, and it was probably about a few years after that he launched his political career.
There are little bits here and there about Ludvig Borga, about Tony Halme, that I thought were kind of interesting. Number one, talked about he grew up in a messed up home. One of his favorite movies was Taxi Driver. Now, do you think that he appreciates Taxi Driver the way a couple of film nerds like you and I do, not necessarily viewing Travis Bickle as a heroic character?
I'm guessing that if Tony Halme were to watch Fight Club,
right,
he'd probably think Tyler Durden was the protagonist.
He'd probably be like, this guy, oh man, yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. So, oh yeah, he loved Taxi Driver. I'm like, yeah, he probably just really loved Trey. He was like, oh man, this guy's awesome. This guy's doing what I think everybody should be doing. He's like, I really feel for the Martin Scorsese played character in this movie. You see that up there? I'm gonna kill that guy. Anyways, so he had wanted to be a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
But as his ex said, he had a big belly. He couldn't, like, he was big everywhere.
Yeah.
And that sort of prevented him. He was in Herb Abrams' UWF. Mm-hmm. It's funny because when they mentioned this, they were like, yeah, no, he wanted to be this Viking character and he wanted to be, this was his deal. And then when it showed his promo, his name card just said Viking.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't even say like the Viking.
Nope,
he
Viking.
was just like, hey, listen, let me tell you something. I'm going to be coming for you. And it just said Viking there.
Viking.
So New Japan took him on after he lied about being a successful boxer. But as Jim Ross said, or I think it was Cornette, I forget who, New Japan liked that type, the big Scott Norton type, the Vader type.
Yeah.
Then he got into a legitimate fight with Scott Norton. Got kicked out of New Japan. This is, man, I know this might sound a bit heavy, but it kind of cracked me up when, because Jim Ross mentions, he took off his boot and you see the SS tattoo there because he had like a Nazi tattoo on his like a calf or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they talk about all this shitty stuff, right? And what's the thing that his wife draws the line at?
Oh,
It's
infidelity.
cheating on her.
Yeah.
Infidelity. I'm like, come on, lady. You knew this guy was a Nazi. Travis Bickle was his hero. And she's like, but he cheated on me, and that was going too far. So that was kind of funny. Anyways, let's see here. He also had, they talk about this, and Cornette's incredulous reaction to the exit only tattoo was pretty hilarious. So he had like, the words exit only, as Cornette says, above his butthole. What does he think that's going to do? Oh man, it's just filled with wild shit like this.
Yeah.
So New Japan drops him because he busts his ankle.
No, WWF does.
Oh yeah. Right. You're right. Because he goes to WWF after New Japan. Yeah, New Japan dropped him because of Scott Norton fight, I think. He tries another real fight, this time in the UFC versus Randy Couture. Talked about ripping a guy's limbs off. He got tapped out within a minute.
Yeah.
Of course, that was Randy Couture's first fight. He became heavyweight champion, a couple of years later. So still. Then I believe did this happen in America? I think this happened in America.
Where he got arrested on the gun and drug charges?
Gun and drug charges.
Yeah, and it got deported.
Because that got him deported. He ended up as one of the Finnish gladiators, the American Gladiators franchise.
He actually had a boxing career in Finland too, I believe.
He did, yeah. He did. And then he found fame in kind of like, besides the gladiator stuff, kind of an unlikely way. A pop song about a Viking.
Yeah.
I am East Viking,
And then he had a whole album, they said, yeah?
Yes. Yeah, he dropped the single. That was successful. So what do you follow up that with? An entire EP. Why
album.
not?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So he did that, and he was able to hook up acting gigs, little celebrity gigs here and there, and then he decided to get into politics because he found like a management company, and they were like, hey, what do you want to do? I want to get into politics as Viking. I want to be President Viking. And so they were like, okay, cool. Well, how should we package you? Find a Nazi party for me. And so he found this like little, very fringe, far right party to run with. And I guess, kind of taking a page out of the book of our current administration. He was a shoot from the hip guy, Larson. Tell it like it is guy. Blame everything on the immigrants guy.
Yeah, that seemed to be... And there was a reporter from Finland that made that same parallel twice.
Finland was economically not in a great
Dealing
situation.
with the recession, yeah.
There was a downturn, a recession, and it's a very standard, lazy, inaccurate trope, but it's an effective one, as we've seen here in the States hundreds of years now, to be honest with you. When things are down, you blame the immigrants. And that's what he did, and it worked. And he ended up winning the particular race that he was in a landslide. But it, that didn't like straighten him up or anything. He would still go on interviews and say horrifically offensive things.
Yes, yeah. Just awful stuff.
And then when he was given an opportunity to backtrack, he would double down. Remind you of anybody, And then the next thing I have here written down is this: Jesus, he had a fruit bowl of pills. So he ended up, okay, so he was a successful politician for the most part. He ended up doing like a celebrity boxing bout, which with like an old friend of his, it was supposed to be like an very silly, but this went the way of like Rocky IV with Apollo Creed and Ivan Drago. Yeah. He got beat. He didn't die, but he got beat up pretty bad. Went on a binge drinking session. Got into a fight with his wife at the time. Swallowed a shit ton of pills. Grabbed a gun. She tried to stop him. The gun goes off. Wife calls 911. In the other room, he's passed out. He ended up swallowing his own vomit. Ended up in a coma in the hospital. Because of all the fallout of all that, he ends up resigning from Congress, from Parliament. Goes on disability. Back on the drugs, ends up shooting himself, and there it is. And the episode was like the end of the episode was like 5 minutes of everybody just trashing his legacy.
Yeah.
So I mean, just it's funny because there are some people. Maybe the point of this is for some people there's no silver lining. There's no redeeming their character, their legacy. Just a piece of trash who died.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
it.
like one of the cast members on the Finnish version of Gladiators had a quote at the end that seemed to kind of sum up maybe what the producer's thesis was about all this. I have it written down here. She said, when you go digging for that root cause, Tony himself said that he's been bitter towards his whole life and to what all has happened to him, that his mother didn't care. Within that big dude, I saw that little boy who was yearning for that attention and love, maybe a little bit of contempt, and then there was the hate. I'm not totally sure that his childhood trauma shaped him into the person he was, but if you do not process through it, you keep carrying that hate within you all that time, so that person will finally destroy themselves.
Yeah. And that's the episode of Ludvig Borga. Next week, what do we got coming
Vader,
up next
I think.
Oh, is it Vader next week?
Yeah, it's Vader next week, yeah.
All right, let's take a look here.
We got Vader next week, the Tony Atlas.
Oh, the Atlas one will be good. The Vader one will be good.
Yeah, Billy Graham.
The Atlas one will be good. Billy Graham. I'm really looking forward to episode 6. Eddie Gilbert.
That'll be interesting.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good one.
Billy Jack Haynes.
Oh, wow.
That's going to be rough. Episode on the original Sheik.
Don't know much about him.
Yeah, I don't either. Daphne, that one's going to be rough.
That's going to be rough to watch.
And then the season finale is on Muhammad Hassan.
That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting, yeah. Anyways, so that's going to do it for this edition of our review of Dark Side of the Ring. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Till next time, we'll see you guys around.
Goodbye.